Hi, I'm Carolia from the Yoga Lunchbox, and today I have the great honour and privilege of interviewing Chai Deva. Now, Chai Deva, along with his wife Bex, is the owner of Evolve Yoga Studio down in Nelson, and they are launching their first year of yoga teacher training programs in April. Perfect opportunity for me to speak to Chai because, as I just found out, believe it or not, he is one of the very rare humans in the world who's had the experience of having an enlightened father. And I don't mean that lightly. I mean that his father was on a spiritual journey and in the 90s went through a full-on enlightened experience. Now we'll get to that. But first, Chai, I wanted to say welcome. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you, Carolia. It's nice to be looking at you as well this morning and having this opportunity to chat.
So let's start sort of at the beginning. When you were a teenager or when you were a young boy, where were you growing up and were you a part of any religion back then? And what was your
So,
formative
yeah,
years like?
so I grew up in first couple of years in South Auckland and then moved to a place called Glen Innes in Tamaki, which is kind of a pretty rough part of Auckland. And so that was my formative years from when I was about 4 till 16, I think it was. I lived there. And I was introduced to, well, my mother became a Jehovah's Witness when I was 4. And that carried on till I was 15. So,
Oh, wow. So you were fully immersed in that as a teenager? Did you buy into it? Did it make sense to you?
um, it kind of created quite a dichotomy for me because to fit into school, I didn't actually tell people. And so I had these two different lives going on where one, I was this good Jehovah's Witness boy at the meetings and things that they talk about 3 times a week and going from door to door and doing all of that kind of stuff, which I found incredibly challenging. I was an extremely shy kid. And actually I was extremely shy right up until I was about 30 odd. So that kind of thing was really challenging for me. And yet at school I was this little rebellious bit of a pain in the ass for the teachers and just really sort of got under their skin. I started wagging school from the age of about 6 and really didn't fit into the system at all. So so I had these two different lives going on and trying to keep these two worlds apart. So it was a very challenging and interesting experience, I guess, on many levels.
So when did the concept of meditation or yoga first arise for you? Because your father was doing a bit of a spiritual search during this time when your mum was a Jehovah's Witness?
Yeah, so he was overseas. I never grew up with my father. I'd see him once every 4 or 5 years. He would come back to New Zealand. So I'd have these little snippets of this guy who was living a pretty wild life. He was involved with Osho, which back in the 70s and 80s was particularly wild, particularly in the late 70s though. We're talking about blackened rooms and everyone coming together naked and just whatever you wanted to do these encounter groups. And he was really intense in his journey, like he was very much focused on that side of things. And so I didn't see him very often, but I'd get these little excerpts with him and these snippets of him coming into my life. Very the polar opposite to what my mother was, with this very rigid religion of Jehovah's Witness with so much good and bad in it. And then he's off in this world where good and bad are just like evil concepts. So so it's very different upbringings from the two of them, or two very different experiences.
So when did yoga and meditation, or when did those practices when did you first become aware of them? Because you went to India in your early 20s, didn't you?
Yeah, so in around 93, I was 22 and left New Zealand for the first time, apart from like 2 weeks or something in Australia when I was 12. But I basically went over there, landed in Bombay to a massive riot had taken place that day. I think there was 800 Muslims killed in one day.
Wow.
With sticks and stones and knives and things like that. It's in the Lonely Planet guidebook as like an epic day in Bombay's history. And so we were in this lockdown situation for a couple of days and then went from there to Pune, which is east of Bombay, basically. And got my introduction to Osho. And, well, actually, I'd been introduced to Osho through my grandmother, who had gone to India in the 70s. And she brought him back and she would talk to me about him. So from the age of about 16, I always had this feeling that I was going to go there.
Yeah, right.
But so there was calling there from quite a young age. And even
So,
from a very young age, I always had this ability to sit still and be silent. That was a skill that I had from a very young age, or a calling, I guess.
so Osho died in 91, didn't he? So if you were in Pune in 93, it was after he died, so you didn't actually
Yeah,
meet him. Was your father there at the same time?
yeah, he was.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I went there to connect with him as an adult, really, and get this different experience of him. And he basically took me to different workshops, and I did a whole heap of different things at the ashram. And yeah, so that was my introduction to meditation, really. It's
Yeah.
pretty freaky. I'd been a punk rocker and a thrash metaler in the lead up to that. So my life experience in Auckland before I was leaving was lots of partying and going out and lots of fighting and things like that. So there was this
So,
very different world that I went from to this
yeah.
ashram and people wearing purple robes and like just being really kind of freaked out a bit about that kind of thing. This is a cult or whatever it is that goes on in the brain. And
Yeah. Did you start to ground into a practice of your own at that time? Like, were you meditating? Were you doing practices? Did it start to make sense in your own experience beyond the orange robes and the sort of cult aspects?
yeah, I had been doing martial arts as well in the lead up to that for about 2.5 years, training 4 or 5 times a week. So I was very focused on that side of things, and I had that as a background going into it. So the meditation actually came quite naturally. And as I say, I already felt very inclined to sit still and to be present anyway. So sort of from there, I took it from there over to the UK, and when I'd be travelling to work on the tubes, I would sit there in silence doing these body scans and things like this. So it was it incorporated into my secular life, and that was very much Osho's teaching as well. It was like he really encouraged his people to come and do your immersions in the ashram, but then to take it into the outside world. So that was a huge part of what his teaching was around. So it seemed a natural fit for me to be meditating on a tube as opposed to being absent-minded on it.
Yeah. Now, that was about the time that your father was going through his really big awakening process, right? Where he became literally, I guess you call it non-dual awareness or an awakened being. Were you around for much of that, or did you witness it? What was that? This is your father, and even though you might have only seen him a couple of times, not many people have that experience.
Yeah. So where was I? I wasn't there when he actually went through the 2 full-on. Well, he had 3 really big awakenings. So the first one, he was in Byron Bay, and I had seen him in the months leading up to that, and that was probably when I had my biggest sort of awakenings as well. So yeah, he was sitting on the beach in Byron Bay and meditating, and suddenly he's described it as a psychic knot was pulled out of his belly, and he literally, his body leapt off the ground while he was sitting cross-legged.
So he levitated.
Yeah, well, there's an energetic burst up.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, off the ground, so a Kundalini blast, something off the ground or whatever it was. And then from there, he was in this state of bliss, and he'd always been scared of heights. And there was a jumping cliff in Byron Bay. I'm not sure where it is, but he went there and in the state of bliss just went and jumped off and ended up breaking his back, landing in the water and landed in there. And so that was kind of his introduction to enlightenment.
Yeah.
And I don't know how bad that, it wasn't like he was paralyzed or anything like that.
Yeah, but he injured himself in the bliss.
Yeah, and so I was in hospital and all these people were coming in and doing healings, and he healed up really quickly and left again. So yeah, that was kind of his start to the whole thing, really. And I would have seen him again, probably wasn't until about 90, this was I think around 95, 96. Oh, that would have been around 96, 97. And then I went to India. Well, my girlfriend was actually in India, and she saw him walking down the street in India, and she'd just seen one photo of him, and she was like, recognized him and went, oh, is that Chai's dad? And so we went over to a guy at an Indian man at a shop and said, do you know who he is? And he went, oh yes, this is Maitreya and this is his book. And he's like got his book there. And so the next person she spoke to was like some German woman who, she went, do you know where he lives? And she went, oh yeah, he's just moved into my apartment this morning. Or not the apartment block. And so no one else in the actual Puna actually even knew where he lived. It was just this one person. And we're talking a city of 3 million people here.
Yeah.
There's around 5,000 seekers at the ashram, so it's pretty small odds. And so she went up to his apartment and she introduced herself, and he was like, oh, well, and then he like channeled a name for me, which is where I got Chaitanya Deva, which is my full name, and said for her to send a message for me to come whenever I wanted to, and I'd be supported to come and meditate. So at that point she rang me up, and I was actually booked on a flight to go to Thailand, and my plan was to go to a Buddhist monastery up in the mountains somewhere and do some meditation in that way. And so I changed my plans and changed my flight and went to Pune, and I ended up spending a year and a half meditating sort of between 4 and 16 hours a day.
Wow.
It was really intensive work. So he did 2 2-hour sittings a day. And there'd be some satsang, some question and answer at the beginning, and then silent sitting. So the silent sitting would be at least an hour to an hour and a half.
Wow. How was that on the body? Like, had you done much asana to that point, or were you mostly meditating?
I was mostly meditating.
Yeah.
I could barely touch my knees at that point. I was like incredibly stiff. So I could do all these amazing things with martial arts. Anything strength orientated, I was just like, and focus orientated, I was had that really strong capacity. But to be flexible, that was not my skill at all. And even now, I'm not like one of these super bendy yogis that can do all these kind of contortion tricks. More strength orientated is what my skills are, balancing and that kind of thing. So that's where I come from.
So when did you start an asana practice? When did asana become part of what you were doing? Because most people kind of go the other way around. They'd start the asana and then the meditation, then the more spiritual practices. You kind of dove in at the deep end with going to Pune and Osho, and your father who'd had these experiences, and then the asana started. Yeah,
I guess in 95 I had my first experience of a yoga class. And this German, I think she must have been my Inga teacher, but she was just like, you don't do yoga with your face! Relax your face! And she'd come and try and push me, and I'd just be this rock, and I was just so much pain. It was just unbelievable. My hamstrings were just like screaming at me, and trying to do this stuff. And I did bits and pieces of yoga through the next 4 or 5 years, but never anything to any real depth. And then 99, I got together with a woman called Sima Fidel, who's actually quite a big teacher over in the UK. And she introduced me to Ashtanga. And then I got to play with my strength, but I also got to do all of this other stuff. And she taught me how to hinge at the hips instead of, I'd just do the rounding at the top of my spine with my hips not moving, and then I'd like reach my knees, and it was just like pain everywhere. Yeah. And so after a week of doing that, I was actually able to reach my toes. So I went from
just getting that shift in the hips.
So I learned from an early phase in there about the importance of technique and just how a little bit of perseverance can actually really shift things really quickly in a tight body.
Yeah, I don't think people realize that you can do yoga or asana for a couple of years, but if you're not really actually open the body, however, if you're doing it with that right technique and that right breathing, it might only take you 2 weeks. There's a huge
and also in doing 60 odd hours of other stuff every day as well. I was just the process at that time when you're with an enlightened teacher, the energy is just moving so rapidly. It's just like most people will do 10, 15, 20 minutes of meditation, maybe even an hour, and that'll be relaxing on your nervous system. It'll give you a state of, it'll change your brain waves, I guess. Yep. So that you then drop into a more silent space or a more relaxed state of being. But when you're doing 4+ hours a day, you're just actually in hell and then heaven and then hell and then heaven as you're there's no middleman. It's just you and your demons. And
so were you burning through the layers? Like the stuff was coming up, the fears and the triggers and all the trauma, like all that stuff.
Yeah, just like.
And you were sitting in it.
Incredible, and just sitting there and just allowing it and going through massive experiences and just dying to who I was. All of this tightness that had constrained me, all of this Jehovah's Witness bringing, all my fighting that I'd done, all of this kind of inner turmoils that I'd had and the fears and, just all of that coming up and just sitting with it and allowing it to dissipate and hanging out. And sometimes it was when we went from India to England, and they had both had reasonably large groups, and then we went to New Zealand and set up a centre there.
Yeah.
And there was only a core group of about 8 of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were all just sitting, just frying in this energy, like reacting to each other and then falling in love with each other and having relationships and breaking up. And, it's just moving so fast. And I remember one day just like walking down, going from the meditation hall to the centre where we would have lunch and things, knowing that I was about to have quite an intense confrontation, I guess would be the word, with someone, and going, I wonder how this is going to play out, because I'd changed so much that I didn't actually know what this person who was about to walk into this situation was actually going to actually experience. It was like, oh, wow, I really don't know who I am anymore. Like, and it's just like, and just being really liberated in that moment of that freedom, like, my past is disappearing. And so much. The changing of the name as well was a really big piece with my mind talk. That still have some of this negative mind talk coming through of like, oh, da-da-da. But I'd use my old name, and it's like the new name didn't have any of this association with it. Mm-hmm. And so, and even to this day, it's like I just don't have like Chai or Chaitanya come up, you stupid idiot, or whatever it was that my brain would come up with my negative self-talk. It just doesn't actually have any grip or hold in there anymore. So, there was quite a big demarcation in that kind of journey at that point.
Yeah. Because you actually ran that meditation centre that your father set up in Marlborough Sounds, right? You ran it for a couple of years, didn't you, in 2006?
Yeah, somewhere in around there. Me and, so had quite a big journey in between. I went off and read The Alchemist and was following this journey of Ashtanga, and went to Auckland to train with a guy called Rod up there who had pretty much the only Ashtanga studio in New Zealand at that time. And so travelled all the way to Auckland to go and do this practice, and then ended up getting a job as a Reiki master and teacher at a studio up there, and then did my massage diploma in massage at Wellpark College. Then went to Convergence and got introduced to Pete Pryor, who's another enlightened teacher. Tantric kind of philosophy was his background, and very much around the masculine and the feminine and these dynamics.
He's based in Governor's Bay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know there were so many enlightened masters in New Zealand.
Yeah. There's a few around there. There used to be a guy called Leslie up in Auckland as well, who was very much a Papaji devotee and came from that very non-dualistic practice. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you met B Pryor and then continue, sorry.
Yeah, and met Bex at that time as well at this thing. So at first we were just friends in a group and didn't really connect on a deeper level, and then she came back to New Zealand and I was living in Governor's Bay at that time. And we ended up getting together, and I just picked her up from the airport, and basically we've been together ever since that day. So that was in 2003. And actually it was 14 years ago, just the other day, 3 days ago.
Wow, congratulations.
And so we moved into this house together, a railway carriage actually, that was converted, and the property was for sale, and it had several different dwellings, and it was a really big house, and it was in the Valley of the One Woman, which is Hinataki Valley. And so I saw Bernie and B. Fryer, and then went up to him and said, we found the best place for you to set up a centre. They were looking to do that in the Valley of the One Woman, and his devotion to the feminine is really it's a big part of the teaching.
Yeah.
And so they ended up moving in and buying the property, and we stayed with them for a year and a half or so in that centre. And again, more burning and transformation living around as an enlightened teacher.
And now you're doing it with the woman that was to become your wife as well, right?
Yeah. So our relationship was founded on that, and that we went to must have been a 10-day retreat or something with Bernie in the days leading in the week leading up to our wedding.
Wow.
and Bernie was kind of one of the main conductors. We had a pretty interesting ceremony that wasn't really traditional in any shape or form. I was in an orange shirt and purple tie-dye pants and not tie-dye, tie trousers.
Tie, yeah.
And Bex in a sari and all in a circle, and so it was tying and blessings, and Bernie led a lot of that ceremony as well. So that was what our relationship was really founded on, was this honouring of the feminine as love and the masculine as consciousness, and playing out from there and bringing those two dynamics together and creating this clarity in life.
So if we fast forward then, like, because this was when did you get married? 2003. Yeah, wow. Oh, wow. Okay. So when you started Evolve Studio in Nelson, which was about almost 4 years ago, you're really bringing this massive foundation. Like, you and Bex have your relationship together, which, like you said, was founded on this experience with B prior. It's not like you just started a studio, is it? It's like you finally got this physical form to channel all of this foundation into.
Yeah. And I guess, that's really what that whole thing, and we also have Evolve Festival as well. So
yeah.
And both of them we bought off other people. They were both businesses that had already been started. And so the festival had been going for 20 years when we took it on. So, and we brought this element of celebration into it as well, because that's one of the things that Osho talks about, is that seriousness is a religious disease. And so
I do love Osho, I have to say.
It's just like, and I really, it really speaks to me, that. And I guess when I did my yoga teacher training as well with hot yoga back in 2008, it was like the thing that really came through for me was my sense of humor.
Right.
And like, it was that was one of the last bits of rigidity. It was like I'd become a bit serious as a meditator, and I was still really, really shy. Like, to speak to more than two people at a time was really unheard of for me. It was a real challenge. I was like, having a room of 100 people, I would be the most shy person there. So that was kind of my sense of being tight and constrained and all of this kind of thing. So within that yoga teacher training, suddenly I found my voice and my expression in this real playful sense of humor, sense of irreverence, I guess, as well.
Yeah.
And I guess because of the depth of my journey, I feel like that irreverence, I can really take the mickey out of it, probably in the same way that Billy T. James could take the mickey out of Marty.
Sure.
It's like,
I mean, you've lived it, like, since the 90s. You've been deep in it, like being with enlightened masters, doing the meditation, like, doing the work, dissolving the layers of the ego. And often, like I say, for so many people when they're starting yoga, that's the beginning of that journey that leads toward dissolving of the ego, whereas you've kind of come in the other way and you're bringing that to what you're doing. Let's talk about the teacher training, because I'm sort of aware of time passing and I don't want to miss out on the juicy stuff. So you and Bex are launching your first teacher training this year, bringing this whole wealth of experience to the training. One of the things I noticed that you talk about on your teacher training page on your website is the importance of self-esteem and being a teacher and what's that about. Why did you pick that out as something worth mentioning in a teacher training?
Okay, so in 2000 I did a course with an organisation called More to Life, and I've been involved with them ever since, both training as a life coach and also a self-esteem mentor and a power of purpose mentor and various other things. And that's been a really big part of my journey as well. And this is looking at the mind talk that we've got going on. So in a single instant, I don't know, I'm just making up figures, but there's like, it could be 10,000 thoughts in a second of like negative thoughts coming through, judging a single moment. And it could be as simple as going to open a door and you push it instead of pulling it, and your mind goes, oh, you stupid idiot, shouldn't have done that. Oh, you're always doing that. And these are the kind of things that are playing out. And you have 3 of those happen in the morning, and suddenly you're having a crap day. And you like go out and then you share that with the world, and it's like, and then the world starts feeding it back to you, and it just kind of ends up in this spiral of things. So a key part of what I want to bring into this teacher training, and it's going to be a very early piece of the training, is to go through, identify what your mind actually says behind the scenes. So we've got some really amazing processes that have worked with thousands of people over 20, 30 years or so, going into how to get free, how to identify it. So see the crap, identify it, tell the truth, and get free from it. And that's going to be a really key part. And so that from there, then you can start to actually be in front of people without all of this stuff going on. You can actually be free to go, oh, right, this is who I am, not who I think I am, but who I truly am. And one of the things that comes with self-esteem as well, just to sort of clarify a little bit, there's a thing what you would call pseudo-self-esteem. So you get a new haircut, you get a new car, you get some new clothes, you pull off this awesome yoga move, whatever it is, and you get this sense of like self-esteem, you're elated, there's some presence there. But it's reliant on this newness, this freshness, or whatever it is that's just taken place, an external source of it, as opposed to this recognition that I am enough as I am. I am who I am enough as I am. And once you start to get into that, it's like, my hair's messy, I'm enough as I am. I've got a new car and it's amazing, I'm enough as I am. And it's just keeping coming back to the truth of that and working from that space as opposed to this need for external validation, will to feel good, or to do something right to feel good.
It's a really sneaky way too of it's very relatable and accessible and real, and yet it's so based in yogic philosophy, isn't it? That ability to witness the samskaras and to uproot them and to let them go, and yet you're coming at it with language that people understand and identify with. In the here and now, even if they have no idea what a samskara is or any yoga philosophy, that what you've just explained they'll get. Yeah.
And I guess that's one of the key things I love about the modern Western approach, is that we bring the psychology and the psychology of language and the importance of it into our yoga practices and things. And so that's what the West, I feel, has really added, apart from also the quality of the asana and the anatomy and physiology from a physical perspective. Those are the 2 really big things that I feel the West has brought to yoga.
Because that's another of your strengths, right, as anatomy and physiology, because you've spent, 20 years as a massage therapist. Like, you know the body inside out. Yeah,
and I love it as well. It's like, once I got that, like, in learning this Latin in my anatomy and physiology, and at first it was just like, I hadn't studied for like, well, actually, I'd never really studied in my entire life. I hated school. I did the barest necessary to get my school C, and then I buggered off and never went back. So I got to this thing, and like my brain was hurting, and it was like, and then teaching me all this Latin, and then suddenly it's like, brevis means short, and longus means long, and triceps means 3, and biceps means 2, and it's like suddenly my brain just got it, and from there on in, I just love the anatomy and physiology and just working with the body and like trying to go, like, how does an arm do that? What has to actually happen to make that take place? And like, and exploring all of that side of things and what's going on with like this fascia stuff, and like that's my real passion now, that I just like absolutely love like where that's going, and this merger into all of these different things all tie into this yogic philosophy of understanding, and it's like the science is coming in from this other perspective, and they're all starting to converge together now, which is such an exciting part of where we are in our history, really. Of like, there's so much knowledge coming together with the internet and this sharing of information on this wonderful medium we've got here now.
Yeah, I love that too about the practice, how somatics is starting to make sense from a yogic perspective, from a trauma perspective, from it's just all coming together. So just in closing, when people come to your training, like, and they've, I mean, you've only got 200 hours with them initially, right? And I love how you make that clear in your description when you talk about this is the beginning of your teaching journey. We'll give you, this is the beginning of the journey. what will make you really grin at the end of those 200 hours with these people when you look at them and you see what?
I think it's actually when you say that, I hadn't even considered that, but it's like I can feel my heart lighting up and just feeling that connection with each of these people, and having observed an intense journey of like this immersion that we're going to have together and just share together, and just the bonding of the group. And I know from other groups that I've been on, there's just something so special and real about it. Of like people, there's a real authenticity that comes through with the teacher training or trainings that you're doing in these kind of practices that creates a way of sharing and connecting that's just really special in this world, and such an important piece to changing or creating peace, really.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. Awesome. Well, Chai, thank you so much for coming on the Yoga Lunchbox, especially given that you were once a shy person. And, you know, and sharing your story. Like, it's an extraordinary story. You have a wealth of experience behind you. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Carolee, for the opportunity as well.